Hey, well, welcome everyone. Really glad you can make it. So we're excited to share some of our findings from a 15-month project that Our-Sci has been doing with support from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and the NAPDC project, which is funded by USDA NEFA. My name is Dan Travis. I'm one of the co-founders of Our-Sci LLC. I'll let Greg do a more detailed introduction later, but basically we try to use open source tooling to support communities of research. So we're here today, and Serena from Pasa, Serena Xu, who's the research technology coordinator, is going to share her insights from this project, and then Greg's going to talk about how we have used open source tools to simplify management of farm data. And I will toss it over to Serena now.
Hi everyone. I've been at Pasa for about the last year and a half, working with mainly our soil health benchmarking study, working with our farmers and with our tech partners, Our-Sci and Foremost mainly, um, on the infrastructure for our study. So I think we'll let Greg do most of the talking here, but I'm going to give a few minutes background on what we do and what we needed help with. So for anyone who doesn't know, our soil health benchmarking study is a community science project that collaborates with farmers to collect data and also provides them with some services like soil sampling assistance when needed. We provide a detailed report every year with soil health metrics and benchmarking against other farms within the state so that they can compare themselves on both soil health and practices like their days of living cover, how much they till, and other things like that. We also provide a marketing infographic that they can share with their customers or whoever they want, and that's what you see pictured to the right. And then we provide a number of opportunities to engage with us and with each other throughout the year. And then another thing that we're working on is publishing reports on our findings from the first 10 years. So I think right now we have about 8 years of data. So yeah, and we have published a public report, I think a couple of years ago, if anyone is curious later. Next slide. So we use a lot of data for this study. We're basically collecting data on all of the actions they take in their fields throughout the year. So for an example, for plantings, we collect their planting dates, termination, the crop type, as in is it a cover crop, a cash crop, a pasture, and the area planted. And I won't read through all the rest, but in 2024, we collected data from about 200 farms, divided into 5 cohorts, which are diversified vegetable, row crop, pastured livestock, urban, and new to us is agroforestry. So it's quite a variety of farmers that we work with. And when we started this project, the plan was to expand the study to at least 500 or maybe 1,000 farms, though we're working through what that will look like in the updated funding landscape. So for this data, every record is reviewed by 1 to 2 people. We collect data depending on farmers' needs through survey stack, spreadsheets, written forms, and phone calls. And so because there's so many different channels that data is coming in through, and a lot of it is self-reported, we really need to check for accuracy and to make sure people actually included all the information that we're looking for. We see a lot of typos on things like areas and dates, and we also look through the records that we receive for each farm as a whole, making sure that they remembered to report things like cover crop plantings and all the soil disturbances that we think are required for their growing practices. Okay, so next slide. When we started this project, we wanted to be able to really significantly increase the number of farms that are participating. And we were partnering with a bunch of organizations from 13 states to expand the study. And we also wanted to make the collected data accessible to our collaborators because they spend a lot of time collecting it and reporting it for us. So this meant we really needed to improve quality control, starting with record collection. The record review process that I described earlier is really time consuming. Um, and anything we can do to reduce that, to automate things, would give us room to do a lot more. So one example of what we've done there is to use Survey Stack, and as simple as having required fields, which we couldn't do in a spreadsheet or written form. We also wanted to standardize the data that we receive. So collecting records through so many channels, we try to keep what we ask for consistent, but there's always going to be slight differences in the format that we're able to get it in. So there's historically and still right now a good amount of manual effort to merge this all. So this is something that we're still working on with Our-Sci, or hope to be working on over the past or next year or two. But a lot of the work from this past year is going to be a good foundation for this. Um, as I was saying earlier, we want to reduce the time and effort that we're spending on data review. So we'll probably always want a human member of our team to look through each farm's records, but there is a lot we think we can automate. A few examples are checking to make sure that the termination date is after the planting date. Sometimes people just report them backwards or accidentally type in the wrong year. So that's a simple one. For manure applications, a lot of times people will report their quantity in tons instead of tons per acre, which, as you can imagine, on a 50-acre field is a really big difference. So those are a couple of things that we think we can automate. Um, Another thing that takes us a ton of time is checking implement names, which categorizing the implements makes a huge difference when we calculate soil disturbance levels. And this requires us to look at what we know of each farm's operations and their historical data, but it would be interesting to automate something like a check to see whether the implement they're reporting is something they used the previous year, since we don't expect a lot of changes in machinery from year to year. And lastly, we want to give better data access controls to our farmers and partner organizations. So to do all this data processing in FarmOS, we needed all our data together to go from one farm to another easily. But we also have other people involved who shouldn't have read and write access to all of our data. So farmers, we wanted to be able to only view their data. We don't want them to make edits after, we've already reviewed and processed everything. And partners who help manage our relationships with farmers in different states, we want them to have access to the data of the farmers that they work with. So a little background on how we arrived at a multi-farm instance. We started working with Our-Sci several years ago because our principles align and because they had a solution for our needs, which was, I think, Survey Stack to begin with. They also work with a lot of similar organizations and could customize solutions for us when we needed, but also see when those customizations are generally needed because we don't, it's nicer to use technology that's used by a lot of people than a one-off just for us in terms of maintenance and other things like that. And then now, after several years, we've realized a multi-farm instance was really important to reduce our hosting costs and ease data management across so many farms. And just a little more information about what's next for us before Greg dives into a demo of more of what they've built. We are going to continue to work to improve the interface and controls in our multi-farm instance. We'd like to be able to do all our data reviewing within PharmOS, but we really need to do a little more experimentation to see exactly how we want things to look and to work during data review. We want to continue streamlining our data flows. We're always going to have to collect through a bunch of different channels, but to reduce the number of times that we move data from tool to tool to tool would be great. And then I think I'm running a little over on time, so I won't go into too much detail about what we want to experiment with. But a few things are data validations using the farm convention, kind of the automated validations that I talked about. And maybe getting farmers into PharmOS to view their data and see if they want to use it through any of the integrations that PharmOS is working on, for example, with Cool Farm Tool. And then we're hoping that all of this work will give us more time to work on our 360-degree data analysis, which is what's going into that kind of big 10-year report that I talked about at the beginning.
Cool. Well, thanks, Serena. That's awesome background. I think I'm going to be able to skip some of my things because I think kind of nailed it there. Cool. So I'm Greg, Dan's partner at Our-Sci. I've been working with Serena and them for quite a few years at this point. What I'm going to do is go through a little bit about PharmOS. A lot of you know it, but some of you don't. I'm looking at the list of names, so I want to at least like give you a sense of what it is. And then I'm going to talk about why we use PharmOS at Our-Sci, and then some of the updates over the last year that we worked on with Serena and others. So those things should be new for everybody and interesting, hopefully, for folks even who've been following these projects for a while. So just background, Dan and I have been in this space, the ag information space, data space, for a really long time. Over a decade, really. We've worked on large projects. We've collected tens of thousands of samples across 40 states with the Bionutrient Food Association as a 4-year project and managed the entire data chain there. And that included the level of detailed farm record collection similar to Pasa's. We collected other types of data. This is me a long time ago with long hair. Collecting information specifically about plants using sensors. We've done other benchmarking projects like the Farmer Coffee Shop with General Mills. So we've done a lot of different things. And I'm saying that to sort of validate that, like, we kind of know what we're talking about a little, but also that we've had a lot of opportunities to work with and think about and see farm record data in action, especially among organizations, both among farms, but also organizations who work with many farms. And the reason that we use PharmOS is because after those many years, we decided that PharmOS is really the right tool for the job. That's what it comes down to. It has a really strong data structure that's flexible. There is no right answer, quote unquote. Ag data is way too complex for there to be a right answer. And we've seen a lot of big companies with multi-million-dollar software fail to handle simple cases like intercropping. So there is no right answer, but we think it's a really good answer, good data structure, really flexible, open source, aligned. It exists and will continue to exist, which even for large projects, if you've been around for long enough, you know that's not always true. So that's some of our reasoning for using PharmOS, even though it's not a piece of software we've sort of solely developed internally. It's primarily maintained by Mike and in the PharmOS core. So what is PharmOS for people who are totally new to this? And I'm going to show you a little bit later, but it's farm record keeping software. So everything that Serena showed, tillage activities, planting activities, harvest activities. It could be observation, pest observations, maintenance logs on tractors, all that kind of stuff you would associate with farm record keeping is things that you can do in PharmOS. It's very generalizable to a wide range of agricultural applications, like I said. But PharmOS is more than that too. It also has sort of two pieces, PharmOS, what I would say PharmOS core, And that's the core development team centered around Mike Stenta, who's here somewhere. And then others like Paul and other major contributors who keep the core application going. And that shouldn't be trivialized. Understand that like any application, for it to exist over multiple years, someone has to sit down and make sure that it will continue to function. Even if there's not a single feature added, it takes effort just for it to continue to exist. And PharmOS Core and Mike and others in the developer community keep that moving. And that is just incredibly valuable, honestly. So that's one kind of component. And then PharmOS community. And that's the broader group of people using PharmOS. There's hundreds of people out there using it for their farms. People use it in all kinds of different ways, and they get together on weekly development calls or monthly PharmOS calls, and they talk about how they're using it, what works and what doesn't. They feed back information into core, or they create contrib modules that modify PharmOS in a way that's more useful for their application. So there's a whole community of people out there, and that's also amazing. It's a robust and well-maintained open source project. But we're actually here to talk a little bit about what's missing or what we can add. So I think I described a lot of the things that PharmOS and the current community and core do well, but the things that can be improved, or the things that we want to bring to the table and have for the last 5 years, is the last mile service, right? It's getting from, okay, I installed PharmOS, or I'm using it, a hosted version of PharmOS. Now what do I do? One way is to go to the forum and go on that path, that learning path, to figure out how to do it. And that's great. If that's you, go do it. If that's not you and you just want someone to help you figure it out, that's where we can help. And it's everything from fit. Is PharmOS the right tool for you? If it's not, how far away is it? What's needed to change? We can help with that. That's could be an hour conversation and you're done. And we're happy to do it. It could be helping to get your historical data into PharmOS. We spent a lot of time, and I'll show you in a minute, with Serena and Pasa getting tens of thousands of activities into their PharmOS instance. And that was Octavio Usuyer did that. We have a lot of specialized tools for that. Setting up procedures. It's not always obvious, even when the system is laid out, that you know how to use the system correctly. You have different people in your organization, technical assistance providers, producers, read-only access folks, they all need processes to be able to interact with the system. Training, of course, goes along with that. Customization when and where needed. PharmOS is great for that because it's very customizable, and some of those customizations are very easy to do. And then lastly, just troubleshooting, being able to have somebody to call to figure something out, to stop messing around for 5 hours and figure something out sometimes in 15 minutes is helpful. So that's where we want to help as Our-Sci move this awesome piece of software along and help make sure that the people who are using it are really using it well and feel comfortable with it. So hopefully that's useful background. Now we're going to talk about what's new. What have we been doing in the last 6 to 8 months, specifically to support PharmOS use for organizations? And when I say organizations, I mean groups like Pasa, an organization who's working with many farms, who's trying to manage and track that data over time. So I'm going to show you a little bit of like before and after, and I'm going to jump around a bit here. So still sharing screen, but I'm going to go back and forth. So the first thing I want to note, move this out of the way, make sure I'm in the right spot, is a pretty significant decrease in the cost. And Serena mentioned that if you're working with 100 farms, before you had to have 100 PharmOS instances that you either set up yourself, which would be quite costly, or you set up through a hosting service like Farmier. And even at a discounted rate, that's still $30, $40, $50 per instance per year. So that's, let's call it $3,000 a year for 100 farms. Now we can have a PharmOS instance which contains many farms in it. So this is my PharmOS instance. This is actually a fully randomized version of Pasa's data. So the fields are going to look really silly because they've been shifted and randomized, so you don't know who it is, but it has all the data in it. And I can go in and I can see all the different farms. And of course, they're not going to look nice because we're not going to show you the actual farm names, but these are real farms from Serena's and Pasa's instance. And each of these is a different farm. So I can click into one of these, and then I can go and look at the fields associated with it. I can see this one has 3 land assets, and I can click into the land asset, see the field. Again, this is randomized. This is not a real field. We did that on purpose. We can see all the IDs associated with it. And then we can even go in and say, well, what are the logs associated with that? Couple disturbance logs, a seeding log, and a termination log. So I can now farm by farm in one nice place that I can log into once, see every single farm that I'm working with, quickly move between them, see exactly what's associated with them. And this is a much nicer interface for doing that long, tedious process that Serena talked about, which is viewing, editing, and fixing data that comes into the system, because that's an inevitable part of doing this work. So that's one thing. That's a big decrease in cost by not having to create a new instance every time you want to add a farm. Second is more and better roles. In the old Farm OS, I don't want to say old Farm OS, in base Farm OS, we have a manager role, a worker role, and a viewer role. And that's like a generally useful set of roles that comes kind of out of the box. But for organizations like Pasa's, they really need like a technical assistance provider role that has permissions to create new farms, right? They need a producer role that's view only, so that producers can see their data, but aren't necessarily going to break it, right? They need to have a primary manager role that can see everything and modify things. So now, if we go into people, we can see we have a lot more roles. So we have a technical assistance admin role. We have all kinds of different stuff. And those roles come with specific processes. So I want to give you an example of what one role can do. So imagine I'm a primary manager of a project, and I'm bringing on a new technical assistance provider. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a person for them and assign them a new login. So they'll get that login. That's easy. And then I'm going to go and imagine it's, TAP admin here. And then I'm going to go assign them some new farms. So imagine I'm going to give them a batch of 10 new farms, right? Let's just say it's 3. I'm going to pick those farms. I'm going to assign a member to those farms. I'm going to pick that TAP admin, do the new one, and add it. And now when that new TAP admin logs in, they're only going to see those farms. So let me show you what that looks like just to give you a sense. So now my new TAP admin, I'm logged in. I don't see all of the every single farm that's available. I only see the ones that were assigned to me, and I can go to organizations and see what's in there. So you can see he had some assigned already, but I assigned those pastured livestock ones, and now they're in there. Great. So now if that person is in here and he's talking to John, with this farm, and John made a mistake, he can go in here, he can look at all the fields associated with them, fix some answers. He can look at the logs associated with all of those, the tillage logs and everything else, and fix data from here as well. It's really quick and easy. And sorry, this is taking a minute. But if he even wants to create a role for the farmer that's view only, they can come into members and add a new member to this farm, which is Farmer John, so that Farmer John can now see this. And that's really what you want to empower with a TAP with, is that set of user journeys so they can do their job. And now that's possible. So that gives you a sense of the kind of roles that you can create. But even more than that, you can change these roles, the names of the roles, and even some of the functionality of these roles to be more appropriate for your organization. Maybe you don't have TAPs. Maybe you have farm planners. Great. Like this can be appropriate for you, and we can sit down and look at what makes sense. So don't feel limited. This gives you a lot of flexibility. Better data upload. I'm not going to show you the data upload itself, but I'm going to show you, let's log out and log back in as our primary user. But I'm going to show you the amount of data that's in here, and that will give you a sense. So Serena and Pasa actually had a very, very large spreadsheet, actually multiple spreadsheets, sort of in multiple tabs, that represented their canonical, basically their cleaned and ready to go historical data set that went back 8 years or 9 years, however long it was. And we had to take all of that data and get it into PharmOS in the right structure, in the right way, so that they could use PharmOS as their primary data structure. And you can see it's a lot. 42,000 activities, you know, over 1,000 fields, 16,000 seeding logs, over 1,000 lab tests. And I think actually we're missing lab tests, so it's probably more than that. And we were able to do that by pulling the data from their CSVs into here. Without going into the code, all I want to say is we have a lot of specialized tools now for taking complex CSVs and getting them into PharmOS in a high confidence way, validating fields and ensuring that it's in the same way that you're going to put new data in is the same way you want to put in your historical data. So that's a pretty big difference because it's a pretty big blocker to organizations thinking about using PharmOS or similar tools. So better data upload. There's also some really new, interesting stuff on the horizon. We did a whole test of uploading data from TAPs into structured data using AI. Basically, the TAP just yaks at their phone for 5 minutes after they interact or onboard a producer, and then that gets converted into structured data. We are absolutely able to do that now, like using AI to take unstructured conversational data, as long as it's not too messy, right? And getting it into structured data like PharmOS is absolutely possible. So there's some really nice new tools to give you new ways to get information into the system. The last thing I want to note is flexibility. So before, unless you were going to host PharmOS yourself, you were probably going to host it through a service like Farmier. And Farmier is an amazing service. If you've never checked it out, you should. It's very inexpensive. But it's also fairly limiting in what you can do. And there's good reasons for that. Mike can speak to that later. But if you're an organization and you want a lot of flexibility, then having a more flexible plan can give you that. And I just want to show you a couple things that you can do. So one thing that we see a lot is people want to be able to add fields. So they want to say, hey, I have like a custom project ID that I want to add to all fields in the system. So you can come in here and you can go to a land asset and you can click on Manage Fields and you can create a new field. So I can create a field. I'll just do it right now and say, you know, my webinar custom field. And maybe this is an ID that's important, right? It references to an ID in another database. Maybe I'm using Airtable or something. It doesn't really matter. So I can create that field really easily, save it. And now all of a sudden, everywhere I have a field in my field records, a land asset, a field asset, I'm going to have this new field available that I can add to and modify. So that's an example of, through the UI, you can actually do a ton. You can also modify what's available in the lists. So if I, for example, want to have a list of animals and I want to add something to here, I can do that through the UI too. I can just say, hey, I want this additional field to appear here, and it'll appear, or remove some and you can remove them. So there's actually a lot of flexibility here that you can use. This requires a different kind of hosting that's a little bit more expensive. But for, you know, $50 a month, which is what that hosting is, or in the ballpark of that, you get a lot more out of it. And it really is something that I hope for a lot of organizations start to finish can work. And then, of course, like there's all the other good stuff that you know about PharmOS. You know, it has a lot of different asset types and log types. You can put a lot of type of information in it. It's open source. You can create your own custom modules. There's all the sort of baseline stuff that's already there. So hopefully that gives you a sense, like, here's the basic, you know, summary. We kind of just went through it. But, you know, before, the hosting cost gets pretty expensive when you go to a lot of farms. And also it's hard to access all the information because it's in many instances. Now it's a lot cheaper and it doesn't cost as much to add additional instances. Before there was a really limited set of roles. Now there's a much more diverse set of roles and they have a lot more access to, they have more complex access to organizations and what's in them, which is what you really want. Before there was relatively simple data upload options, which were useful through PharmOS, but often didn't meet the needs of complex historical data. Now we have tons of tools to do that faster based on what your needs are. Before you were pretty limited in using standard FarmYear if you were going to go that route to be able to really modify your instance. And now you'll have a lot more flexibility in modifying that instance faster. Because the instance will really be more yours. It's a little bit less cookie cutter. So that's really it. You know, I wanted to share all those changes. I wanted to let folks know that this is something we really want to do. Like, we want to help, whether it be an hour sitting down with you, talking about the quality of fit for PharmOS, or, you know, spending a couple hours helping build out SOPs because you already know how to use it. Or troubleshooting issues that you're having today. No matter what it is, like, we would love to contribute to making more people use this software, make it more accessible, and make it a better fit for some of these organizational needs or farm level needs. So that's it. And the offer for us is, like, we will always spend at least an hour for free just sitting down and talking with you through your application. And we'll send back a report or a set of recommendations based on what our experience is, which could be don't use PharmOS, or it could be use PharmOS but, or it could be we think this is a great fit. Whatever it is, you know, we'll give you an honest answer. That's our job. And that's it. That's the end of my piece. So, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I was going to say thanks, Greg and Serena. So yeah, our goal was, or our hope was, that we would have, you know, 20 minutes for open discussion and questions. And I think time-wise, we're doing really well. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts, you raise your hand or come off of mute or put them in the chat if that's you're more comfortable with that. All right, Greg, do you see Vic left a comment in the chat? Could you walk through that?
Sure. Sorry, I just got to open up the chat window.
Oh yeah,
here.
I can read it for you.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited about these new role options. Could you talk us through the process of what it would take for a new organization to go from a base PharmOS to using these new role capabilities?
Yeah. So the role options are, you know, in PharmOS lingo, just a set of added modules that we developed with Miriam and Pedro and their team at Cambrico. So they did such an awesome job. So basically, you need to have a PharmOS instance, which right now would probably be custom hosted. We've been talking to Mike about doing a custom hosting option through FarmYear in the ballpark of like $50 a month. That's obviously a lot more than the $75 a year for the sort of out of the box, but that's because you're just going to want more flexibility that really can't be provided by the out of the box option. So simple answer is you get a custom hosted PharmOS instance. It's $50 a month. You install these modules. and then off you go. If you feel like the sort of base roles are not a fit, then talk to us. We'll sit down and help you get the roles that you need, which may be some consulting hours or working with Miriam, but is not complicated to do. And then off you go. Does that help?
Well, my understanding is that Drupal has like recipes for adding new roles fairly simple. So it's not like we're custom developing a new role, but rather applying these different recipes or tools that already exist within Drupal to get there with, fairly low effort.
Yeah. That's one thing I'm excited about, is the more people that we work with or that develop around these things. And we're really focused actually on like conservation planning and other types of farm planning applications. They're going to tend to have similar roles, and we can make recipes, and Mike or others feel free to fill in, but we like to make recipes where the roles are preset for your, for planners, for example. Maybe there's some data that's pre-populated. So you're kind of getting something that feels like it's ready to go, all the way down to the data and the roles. And that's my hope. But we need to set up a couple of these first to get a sense of what it looks like for each of these kind of subsets of groups. Yeah, that's my hope. I want to just note something too, is like in the past, we've spent probably too much time, to be honest, on trying to generalize things. And we want to continue to bring things to PharmOS core to generalize what we can generalize. But we also don't want that to limit what people need to do right now in order to use the software effectively. And I think having that kind of base user access in Drupal, where you can really modify what you need to, will help people get off the ground a lot faster now, I hope. So Ankita asks, not sure there's an easy answer without going through multi-farm use case. Oops. But what's the general timeline of going from here's my sheets plus SOP to usable system and a few custom fields? It does depend on the use case, but it could be short. If it's not a lot of custom fields and the spreadsheets aren't completely insane, that 100% could be somewhere between hours and a week, that's what we're trying. That, I think, to the point, Ankita, that's exactly what we're trying to pull so far down that we can almost do it without people feeling like they're having to spend thousands of dollars and commit tons and tons of resources to even get to something that looks like realistic. We want to get people to something that looks like realistic within a pretty darn short amount of time. Is PharmOS for organization more geared to this multi-farm use case, or is it still a good fit for a single farm that needs more flexibility but doesn't want to host their own? It could be. It could be, Zach. Depends on what your needs are. Some farms actually are multiple organizations. There's reasons why people split things up by farm. If you bought multiple farms, people split them up that way. So we'd have to walk through it. I'm happy to walk through it, Zach, just to show you more detail and see what's useful. Eric asks, can you speak to a broader vision with Common Farm Convention and where the multi-farm instances could support cross-org interactions? Yeah. So the Common Farm Convention is just PharmOS's data structure in JSON API form or JSON schema form. And what it allows you to do is to more concretely specify what is and is not included in how you structure your farm data, whether that be custom fields or drop-down lists, or whatever that is. So I think honestly, this applies to the Common Farm Convention as much or more as anything else. It's the same basic idea. If you want to move data from your multi-farm instance to anywhere else, then you're going to want to validate it. You're going to want to provide the person receiving it with clear instructions on its structure, and so they can validate it. It's all the same kind of arguments. So yeah, I don't know if this is a unique or application, but it's the same ideas apply. Yeah. Does that help, Erica, or is that not a useful answer? Or feel free to put other stuff in the chat. Yeah, Zach, just follow up with our Dan or I, or we can just chat through it. Cool. Any other thoughts? Anything else anybody else wants to like me to screen share or show, or anybody feel like this is cool, but, you know, I mean, that's been a lot of stuff when we get feedback on Farm OS is this is cool, but it's still missing A, B, and C, which I need. Obviously, you can never do everything all the time, but curious of how people feel what might still be missing. Ditto. If anybody wants to contribute also, especially to the, you know, getting data in, that's one of the biggest limitations still to any of this stuff. And that would be amazing. Always open to partner and try to solve other problems. Cool. Well, we're at 12:15. I think that was the end. So if there's not anything else, thank you for showing up. Thanks for walking through it. Yeah, Dan, can you put, or I'll put my email in there. That's Dan and I basically. Yes, actually, Erica, we didn't show it, but we're starting to use the charts module to do some basic benchmarking display in the dashboard in a multi-farm instance. So you can look at a farm and it'll show a comparison between that farm's soil carbon and the average soil carbon in the system, or it'll show that farm's soil carbon in a field over time. Again, this is all like basic Drupal stuff. If you kind of work with Drupal instead of fight against it, Mike's probably laughing here, then there's a lot you can do. When you try to fight against it, then you're doing a lot of customized stuff. So I think one of our goals is as much as possible work with Drupal, you know, get the low-hanging fruit that's going to work. And I think there's a lot we can do. Cool. Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. If anybody wants to stay on and just chat, Zach, actually, like, I'm happy to stay on and chat if you just want to talk through stuff now. If anybody else has questions, feel free to stay on. Otherwise, we appreciate it.